Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the final session of this wildfire recovery series. We have Tom back this week. Tom is our French language coordinator with the Reforest Canada Collective, and he's here to explain about the interpretation option we have, and he'll also be here for the translation of any French questions coming into the Q&A chat. Go ahead, Tom.
Très bien, merci. Oui, je m'appelle Tom Haney, je suis le coordinateur des communications bilingues au collectif. En effet, nous sommes très contents d'offrir un service d'interprétation en direct pour nos participants francophones. Et donc, nous tenons à remercier Yalina et Alianka, qui seront nos interprètes pour la séance d'aujourd'hui. Et quant à l'activation de cette fonctionnalité, c'est très simple. Il suffit de cliquer sur l'icône interprétation en bas de la fenêtre Zoom. Et comme l'indique la diapo, on peut écouter la version française soit avec la voix du conférencier en arrière-plan, soit avec l'audio original coupé. C'est à vous de décider. Donc, sur ce, je vous souhaite un agréable webinaire. Amber.
Okay, thank you. I'm Amber. I'll be hosting again today. Sarah Barker, our project manager, is also found in the chat. She's with the RCC as well. Please note that this session again is being recorded, and we'll post the link soon on the English and French sides of the Knowledge Hub. As mentioned, this webinar series is hosted by the Reforest Canada Collective, which is a 2 billion tree funded initiative launched in December of 2024. The RCC exists to support the implementation of 2 billion tree projects across the country. And we do this by creating a platform for Canada's tree planting community to connect, collaborate, and share knowledge. This webinar series is one of our first offerings, as many 2 billion tree projects are being implemented on post-wildfire sites. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about us and reach out if you want to discuss any ideas on how the RCC can help your organization. We will hear from 3 speakers today, and we will open up the floor to questions at the end. Please use the Q&A box to type in any questions you may have for the speakers. We welcome participation as well in the chat again, so feel free to introduce yourself now and let us know where you're calling in from, including the traditional territory if you like. The organizing team and speakers are joining this session today from the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Kanien'kehá:ka, Mississauga, Anishinaabeg, Algonquin, Huron-Wendat, Clicho, Matthias Colomb Cree Nation, and the Lukwagan-speaking people, including the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. We recognize the essential role that fire has played in the traditions and practices of many Indigenous peoples in what we now call Canada, and we hope to give a platform to discussions that advance the integration of the role that Indigenous communities can play in landscape restoration as well. The approaches and strategies again presented today are being trialed in specific ecological contexts. So the intention is not to advocate that one single approach be duplicated in another part of the country, but rather to share ideas, options, and insights. After this series is over, we'll be compiling notes, learnings, and takeaways from each session to summarize the knowledge shared. We're lucky again today to have Val Deziel, Director of Restoration Programs at Forest Canada. She's going to be moderating today. She's a grasslands expert and woodland management expert as well, has a ton of experience with prescribed fire as a tool for landscape restoration, and she's an RX 200 burn boss. She's also a member of the Society for Ecological Restoration. Thanks for being here again, Val, to moderate.
Thank you so much, Amber. Over the last 2 weeks, we have focused on sharing research about forest dynamics after wildfire, followed by a few examples of different approaches being used for forest recovery through tree planting. As mentioned in previous weeks, more research and experimentation are needed to fully understand best practices for this type of restoration in Canada. Peer learning and collaboration are essential for carrying out this important work effectively. The speakers featured today will touch on some important aspects of tree planting after fire not discussed yet: planting for future wildlife habitat, collaborating with Indigenous communities, and leading a provincial planting program after a series of extreme fire years. I'd like to thank our speakers today for offering their time during this webinar session to help us understand more about these topics as we come to the final installment of this series. Up first is Monica Nederend, who joins us today as a registered professional forester, a background in wildfire and fuels management at the strategic and site level planning scales. She is a technical co-lead for the Preserving Our Land project for Clicho government, which aims to reforest recently burned areas in Clicho lands in Northwest Territories. Welcome, Monica.
Hey, thanks so much. I'll start by sharing my screen here. Okay, yeah, thanks everyone for joining. And then as Val and Amber mentioned, I'm Monica Nederend. I'm an RPF with BA Blackwell Associates, forestry consulting company based in North Vancouver. And I'm presenting today on the Preserving Our Land, Preparing for the Future Post-Wildfire Reforestation Project led by Clicquot government. And I'm just going to discuss some of the goals, objectives, the rationale for this project, and some of the work completed to date. Let's see. Okay, starting off with some context about the project location. The general area is west of Yellowknife near the Clicquot community of Betchko on the west end of Great Slave Lake. It's within the bounds of the Clicquot Land Claims and Self-Government Agreement. So notably, it's Clicquot laws and policy that are governing our work here, not the Northwest Territories. The treatment units are located within the perimeters of two major recent wildfires. So the first, the 2022 wildfire, which burned west of Betchko. So this is the smaller perimeter on the left side of the map. And then the 2023 wildfire, which burned from Betchko towards Yellowknife. This is the large perimeter at the center of the map. And then finally, note this project is funded by Natural Resources Canada's 2 billion tree program, as well as by Tree Canada. And it's led by another company called Let's Plant Trees. So Blackwell's not the proponent here, just a contributor. Moving on, just to share the overall goal and objective of this project. Yeah, in line with the theme, the primary goal is reforesting areas burned by wildfire that are not naturally regenerating. So I'll talk about that more in a minute, but the objectives to be met in achieving this goal are maintaining the historic ecosystem structure and composition of the area and accelerating the development of barren ground caribou winter forage habitat. Next, we can talk about why replant in this area and what is the rationale for this project. And the answer to that has to do with changing wildfire regimes in the north. So historically, large areas regularly burned in the boreal forest. This is because there are several characteristics at an ecosystem level that predispose them to stand replacing fires. Just for example, abundant and flammable vegetation, a dry, semi-arid climate, and significant lightning activity. So just a few of the contributing factors. At the same time, we've seen boreal forests historically be resilient to these disturbances. So even though there's this stand replacing severe wildfire regime, we also have vegetation that's well adapted to it to date. So here's some examples: conifer trees with serotinous cones that open to release seeds after fire, deciduous vegetation with below ground rhizomatic structures, which will sprout and regenerate after disturbance, and then persistent seed beds where seeds can stay viable, buried in the forest floor for very long periods of time. So given all that, however, there have been changes to the resilience of vegetation and changes to wildfire regimes in the north that have been observed in recent years. In terms of changing wildfire regimes, we are seeing that similar to other areas in Canada, fire frequency and the area burned is increasing. So the Northwest Territories has seen 2 record-breaking seasons in the last 10 years in terms of area burned. So this includes 2014, when 3.5 million hectares burned, and 2023, when 4.1 million hectares burned. So then as we have wildfire regimes changing, there are also changes to the vegetation that grows back post-burn. And you might see, for example, the dominant tree species shifting in an area from one conifer species to another, or from a coniferous lead stand to a deciduous lead stand. Another example of vegetation change is forest loss that has occurred in some areas where vegetation grows back, but trees are no longer the dominant species. Specifically in our area, like within the treatment unit area, we've seen the success of jack pine over previously black spruce dominated stands, and then some areas where regeneration seems to be significantly delayed or not yet occurring several seasons after a fire. And then finally, it's worth noting that these changing vegetation or the changing vegetation that we are seeing has impacts for the quality and quantity of barren ground caribou winter forage habitat. And this is relevant to point out because it's an extremely important concern for community members. So with all that rationale, here's some of the work that we've done to date. Mostly this has involved community consultations, site assessments, cone collection, and seedling production. And that is from 2022 through the fall and winter of 2024, 2025. And then in summer 2025, we were looking at beginning planting, planting 1,730,000 trees in the summer of 2025, and then followed by another 1,000,000 trees in the spring of 2026. So the next slides will just kind of review some of these project phases, starting with site assessments. So these were activities done by Blackwell, led by Blackwell. So we made observations in the field, focused on a few different topics, which included tree density and distribution via plots. Tree species and microsite preferences were observed, urban shrub community composition, the overall burn severity that we were seeing, and the types of vegetation that burn versus what we saw regenerating. And then we also were comparing stand types that we were observing on the ground with satellite imageries, and that was helping us draw treatment boundaries and delineate net out areas in these extremely large treatment units. And then we took all that information and we're using it to create planning prescriptions that will guide tree planters and supervisors during operations. The next phase was cone collection. This was a bit of a unique project feature that was necessary for a few reasons. First and foremost, it was important to Clicquot to have seed from their lands planted for this project. And then second, like another factor was that there wasn't nursery production or seed collection of stock that was very suitable for this site that occurring in this area is very far north, quite remote. So we had, there's some Clicquot crews that went out, they collected white spruce, black spruce, tamarack, aspen, and birch seeds for this project. All the cones got shipped to PRT growing services facilities in northern Alberta for seed extraction, cleaning, testing, and seedling production. And this photos with some of the crew members with a pallet of black spruce cones, and then some folks processing in the field. And then just, yeah, a few notes about the tree planting operations themselves. This is led by Spectrum Resources, so I don't want to overstate my knowledge of this project phase, but their plan is to mobilize in late June and drive up from Prince George to Betchko. And as of now, they plan for 20 days of planting with 2 crews at 100,000 trees a day. So the crews should be about 60 people altogether. And this includes some Clicquot trainees as kind of part of a local employment focus for the project. And then in terms of the logistics for these remote sites, most of these areas we're working in are heli access only. So the plan is to construct helipads. Those are the yellow crosses on the diagram. And then safe walking trails that are going to link them all together. And that's the red lines. And then the idea is that trees will be long lined by heli to those pads as like staging points. Then the tree planters work out and back from the access trails The idea with this is minimizing any chances of becoming disoriented. And then finally, monitoring, another important part of the project, kind of moving into the future. We're planning on conducting surveys to monitor survival and health of the planted seedlings. And that's going to be helping us make adaptive management decisions into the future, and ideally another opportunity for local employment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monica. Wow, what a collaborative approach. That's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Next, we'll invite Floyd North to join us. Floyd is a member of the Matthias Calhoun Cree Nation and Community Liaison for the Nekoté Limited Partnership and the Canadian Craft Paper Partnership. Floyd works with many First Nation communities in northern Manitoba to engage and facilitate projects, including tree planting after wildfire. Welcome, Floyd.
Hi, everyone. Guess I'll just give a little background or so. I'm joining this meeting from traditional territory of Matthias Calhoun, and I'm actually on the sub-territory called Kichiwapa, and I work for a partnership between 7 First Nations and Canadian Craft Paper, and our partnership has the largest forest management license area in the world. And so we have a lot of responsibility. And one of the areas that, is always such a big threat to our industry is forest fires. And all our management and planning efforts are to, mitigate these forest fires from destroying large areas. And a lot of our planning is all centered around harvesting, but in recent years we've joined the 2 billion tree program, and we've been working with this company called the Blue Green Project. And we actually did a planting project a few years ago already. And last year we actually went back to the area, take a look at how well the planted trees were taking to the environment, to the land there. And it was quite remarkable what we saw, and how healthy the trees were. And when you look at the spacing, because we deal with that, we cut trees down and then we replant them the following year, no later than 2 years. And sometimes when you see what a forest fire grows back, when you're part of the forest, like I've been working in the forestry since 2013, and you kind of see a lot when you work for these big companies and the communities. And the area we planted was a huge area that burned, and it was incredible how devastating that fire was on that area. And the amount of trees we're going to need to replant that area is that's a huge undertaking for anyone wanting to plant. I think we could put the 2 billion trees in that one fire area. It's so huge. And so, some of the things we learn about, the forest, we look at, what takes place when it burns. And, now that we're starting to plant these areas that a forest fire goes through, we have to make new plans in our partnership to mobilize the people from each community to come out there and plant. Like, we've never had to do that. it was something that the corporation did. Craft Paper was the one that would do all the planting and pay for it. But in the last couple of years, the communities have gotten involved through the Nekoté Limited Partnership, and now they're being responsible for managing these projects, partnering with the right people, so that all these trees that are, first of all, the cones are picked by a group of people, then somebody's got to plant those cones and get some seedlings, and then it's a huge effort on the part of everybody, to get all those seedlings to that area, and then the effort that's put into coordinating, because some of our projects, I think there's like 70-80 tree planters on a project, so there's a lot of planning that goes into that. And this year, we're continuing to work with the Blue Green Project, and we're going to continue planting the area that the forest fire went through. And this year, it seems like more community members from the 7 communities will be participating. So there'll be a lot of employment opportunities for the 7 communities and other communities that I engage. And there's actually been quite a bit of discussion this last 2 weeks about recruiting tree planters from each community, and all the communities have responded, and I guess are now planning to, figure out who they're going to send from their community to go be a tree planter for the summer. So, those are just some of the things I see in the partnership. But I also have another view, because I live in the bush and I use the forest almost every day. And our community is a pro-development community. And one of the things we're actually doing right now is we're planning a harvest north of our community, because the forest is an old forest. And when you go into that area, a lot of the decline is starting to take place on the land, and it's starting to build up fuel on the ground, and you can see that a simple spark, a lightning strike, will set off a pretty big fire. And we've been lucky. So in 2004, we had one fire that came right to the edge of the community, and we're a fortunate community because we actually have the firefighting base. So all the choppers and water bombers and everything is here. So they were able to, stop the fire from burning down our houses. But, when you look at that, so in our community, we've said to ourselves, well, those trees are eventually going to burn. And when you look at the north side of our community, half our community is sitting like the spruce trees are, if they light up, your house is going to light up. And so we're making plans to do a harvest, and we're going to take down all the trees in that area. And, we have sawmills, so we have a pretty pro-development community when it comes to, protecting ourselves against forest fires and utilizing that timber before it burns, and, making an economy out of it. And then at the same time, the other thing we don't see, or a lot of people don't see, I believe, is the devastation on the animals that takes place when there's a forest fire in the summer, because you go walk around and, you find moose, caribou, and it's all the females, because they have calves and they have their babies, so they don't run as early as the males, the transient males. And So as much as a fire to some people is renewal, to communities like myself who practice treaty rights, it's devastating because you lose generations of animals and they're not easily replaced. You know, that void in that area remains there till nature, you know, starts to regrow the plants and the trees and the things that, you know, attract the animal species back to the area. And so, you know, we're doing our best to mitigate so that we don't have devastating fires, because we all know that once they get going, and in recent years they've been unbelievable. We've watched some huge fires burning in northern Manitoba and kept people working the whole summer. We've had early fires, like we're having fires in early May, which is unheard of. So, you know, I think we might have to have like a 10 billion tree program to replant all the areas that are, you know, going to burn if, you know, the temperature and the way nature is changing. And there's starting to be a lot of fires. So I guess I'll stop there. And
Thank you, Floyd. Great to hear your experiences and your connection to the land. We appreciate that. Finally, we have Melanie Plett. Melanie began her career in forestry as a tree planter at the age of 18. Since then, she has worn a variety of hats in forestry and wildlife biology. She has a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resource Conservation from the University of British Columbia and a Master in Forest Conservation from the University of Toronto. And she is both a registered professional forester and a biologist. She is the Forest Investment Lead for the Forest Investment Program for the Ministry of Forests in British Columbia, with a focus on managing forests to increase carbon sequestration and reduce emissions. She leads a team across the province who focus on Indigenous relations, policy and program documentation and development, forest nutrient management, seed and sowing, and British Columbia's timber sales, innovative timber sales licenses, and British Columbia's 2 billion tree agreement. Welcome, Melanie.
Thank you. I'm gonna share my screen. Awesome. Am I sharing now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I am coming today from the unceded territory of the Lekwungen speaking people, who include both the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. I am going to talk to you today about the BC Forest Investment Program in partnership with the 2 Billion Tree Program and the post-wildfire reforestation we are doing through those programs. We've actually been leading half-day workshops on this topic recently with our partners around the province. So I'm going to see how much I can tell you in 12 minutes. I'm going to give you a background on Forest Investment Program, wildfire reforestation objectives, overview planning, eligibility assessments and reforestation, some success and future opportunities, and then a little bit about authorization requirements for externally funded projects. The goals of the Forest Investment Program are to advance partnerships with First Nations, establish healthier, more resilient forests, increase contributions to mitigating climate change, and to provide stronger accountability to the public and program partners. So the Forest Investment Program is a government program funded by BC Ministry of Forests. And the program plans, delivers, and reports on about $100 million worth of silviculture investments annually, give or take a little. We plant about 40 to 50 million trees per year. These are all non-legal obligation trees and mostly in wildfire burned areas. We also oversee the 2 billion tree BC agreement on forested public land. We manage the seed supply for our program. We apply forest nutrients to 20 to 40,000 hectares per year. And we also have a Ministry of Forest Service Plan target to reduce or sequester 2 million tons of CO2e per year when cumulatively measured to the year 2050. And to date, we've always been surpassing that. We also monitor our results to make sure we are achieving what we intend to achieve and also make changes if required. And of course, we could not do this without the help of our many, many partners across the province. So just a big thank you to all the folks out there that we work with. So as far as post-wildfire reforestation objectives, focus on this presentation is going to be on the work we do in partnership with the 2 billion tree program. We do post-wildfire reforestation to achieve a whole multitude of benefits, including climate change mitigation, habitat restoration, riparian restoration, increased employment, reducing hydrologic impacts in disturbed areas, enhanced protection of downstream aquatic ecosystem, increasing soil stability, and these are to name a few. The goal is to restock areas that won't regenerate naturally and then establish more resilient future forests by planting a diversity of species and seed selection that are applicable to future climates. When wood cannot be salvaged by other programs, our preferred method for our planting is underplanting. And this means planting under the standing dead rather than what was traditionally done, which was knock down, piling, burning, and planting. We prefer underplanting as it results in higher GHG benefits. There are hydrologic benefits. The standing dead help retain moisture and provide shade and protection for new seedlings. It's also cheaper, and it results in improved structural diversity, which benefits wildlife habitat. And most importantly of all, we can do this safely. Our overall goal, of course, is to get the right tree in the right place. So first off, for those that are not aware, in BC, 95% of the forest land is public land, very little private land. This slide indicates the total area burned on forested public land for some of our recent significant fire years in BC. From these years combined, there's been approximately 6 million hectares of area within fire perimeters. And of this area, only just over 330,000 hectares occurs in areas with legal obligations. So subtract that from the 6 million, we've got a lot of area to analyze for reforestation potential. These are gross areas though, within the fire perimeters and have not been netted down. So there can be a substantial area in fire perimeters that is unburned or lightly burned. And in the end, actually only a small fraction of these areas are going to require reforestation. But from this big, huge area, we need to identify areas with the highest priority for reforestation based on multiple factors. So early planning, we should begin as soon as possible in the winter following the fires. The goals are to assess damage, focus our efforts, and plan for future surveys. This allows time also for collaborative planning and engagement and provides opportunities for salvage harvesting, which usually occurs in the first couple of years. Since 2017, our wildfires are now way too large and there are way too many of them to use traditional methods, which used to be helicopter and getting on the ground. We now need an approach that uses GIS tools and data to assess viable areas prior to putting the boots on the ground, just so that we know where to focus those efforts so that we get the biggest bang for our efforts. GIS data that is used includes post-wildfire intensity mapping, wildfire imagery, stand age data, inventory data, terrain and natural regeneration potential information, which is based on ecology, aspect, and pre-fire stand conditions, as well as forest stewardship values and funding criteria. in order to prioritize areas. Using this data helps to remove significant areas and focus on where we need to do on the ground assessments. Like I already said, majority of area won't get assessed for reforestation, and this could be because it didn't burn or there was low intensity. Could be areas are too steep to get planters, inaccessible, high rocky areas, and areas also that might have a high likelihood to naturally regenerate. The map on this slide is of the Elephant Hills fire in BC, and it indicates burn severity. It's got different variations of the color red. In the table, you can see that only about 15% of this fire had a high severity burn, and another 40% was medium. So using this type of data, along with the data I listed earlier, areas can be narrowed down to highest priority that can sites that can benefit most from reforestation. So based on the outcome of the overview planning, as well as collaborative planning and engagement, areas are prioritized for eligibility assessments on the ground. And these assessments include walkthroughs or ground surveys to determine if areas are in real life viable for reforestation, which then leads to prescriptions for planting. We have been moving away from calling these surveys and instead calling them eligibility assessments. And this is because our main focus is to find areas that are eligible and can benefit from reforestation. And we are finding plot by plot inventory type surveys weren't getting at this quickly or efficiently enough. And sometimes, yeah, you could waste a lot of time. In year one, the focus was on the high severity burned areas that are post-free growing plantations. So they were harvested in the past, but now have met their free growing obligations, but then they burned. And these are our highest priority early on because we know they're productive sites, they're accessible, and they're less likely to regenerate naturally. And on top of this, there's no likelihood of salvage harvesting. Then year two, we move more to the mature forests, and we start reviewing those. If areas have high potential to seed in and regenerate naturally, we hold off on those the longest. The eligibility surveys should focus on potential presence and quality of natural regeneration and opportunities for successful establishment. Sowing occurs once areas are confirmed for planting and species are chosen. Approximately 25% of all area surveys for eligibility will get planted. And the image on this one, again, of the Elephant Hill fires shows all the areas in that fire that have been surveyed to date. And so only about a quarter of those yellow areas will get planted in the end. On average, we find that only about 5% of the entire fire areas within perimeters requires reforestation and gets planted. And I understand that this Elephant Hill fires in particular has essentially most, if not all, of the areas eligible have been planted. So successes and future opportunities. We've been able to achieve timely, cost-effective, and successful reforestation with the help of all of our partners in these really large-scale fires. We've been working collaboratively with First Nations and the public to target efforts in important areas for communities. We've been improving biodiversity as well as climate adaptation of the areas we plant. Monitoring we've conducted has improved our knowledge and success of planting post-wildfire. We've been able to maintain a stable workforce, including nurseries, surveyors, and planting contractors by reaching and then maintaining our government-funded reforestation goals. We've also been able to integrate our processes into collaborative planning in the forest landscape plans and wildfire recovery plans. And right now we're looking at opportunities for incorporating more non-tree native plant species into our planting programs, shrubs, cultural and medicinal plants, in order to achieve multiple benefits. Just added this slide. This is slide for any externally funded 2 billion tree projects in BC. For folks that are interested in initiating these types of projects, because they're externally funded and not through our program, there are authorizations required, and I just want to make a note of that. Here's a lengthy flow chart of the authorization procedures, but just some highlights for folks interested in initiating these. It's really important to obtain Ministry Forest District endorsement before applying to the 2 billion tree program. This helps to avoid overlap with existing projects or planned projects or any other conflicting priorities. It also is to ensure the success that a project will be possible to move forward and can actually improve the speed with a project is approved by both federal and provincial governments. So it's pretty important. Prior to commencement of these projects, proponents do need to acquire both special use permits and the Forest and Range Practices Act Section 52 authorizations. And these are, so it's important that the districts, and these come from the district, so it's important the districts are on board from the beginning. For any of these authorizations, First Nations consultation is also required before the authorizations can be finalized. But you can always contact us to see if we can, there's other ways to work with us directly where yeah, so that you don't need to go through the authorization process, but just for a note so folks are aware. And finally, there is a QR code and more information regarding our program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and thank you to all of our speakers today. Now we will open up for questions and answers. First on our list is a question came in from Abir Arbi to Monica. How is the decision made to proceed with plantation in a given area? Is it based on an assessment determining what that natural regeneration is unlikely to occur? How can we determine that natural regeneration is unlikely to occur? And what measures can be taken to ensure the long-term persistence and success of the plantation?
Okay, wow, that's like 3-in-1 questions. Well, I guess like first of all, I guess okay, the first part was how's the decision made to proceed with planting in a given area? So there's like maybe a couple factors that go into that. Firstly, there's guidance from Clecho, like where they are interested in having this project directed in their territory. So that's kind of the number one factor. The second part of it is we're trying to focus on areas within the Bathurst herd of barren ground caribou. They're like highly used winter range. So their winter range like expands, contracts, and changes over time. And there's certain areas that are currently used more frequently within the historical range area. So that like we're trying to, you know, work within their annual range and then eventually work to target, you know, the winter range area that the caribou are looking for. So that kind of helps direct some of it. And then a third thing is like also because so much of the area is so remote, there has to be like, we're kind of working closer to some communities because you can't just fly to the middle of nowhere and set up a tree planting camp and like, you know, it just you kind of lose the plot pretty quickly the further you get out from some of these towns, which are like quite small as it stands. So there's that. And then I mean, I guess the other thing that I would say, like when Abir says, is it based on an assessment determining that natural regeneration is likely to occur? So with regards to that, I think there's a couple things. First, that there's obviously there isn't a huge history of like industrial forestry within the Northwest Territories. So some of the forest inventory information and like fine-grained ecosystem classification information that I'm used to working with in BC is simply not available at all. So the information that you'd use to hone in on and make those kinds of assessments and surveys is not not available. And secondly, that this, like, I didn't really have time to get into it in a short presentation, but like a lot of this, as far as I can understand, the science around these changes in vegetation post-burn and like changes in the kind of ecosystems that are regenerating after these large, severe, and repeated fires, a lot of that is fairly new, like to the best of my understanding, and I'm not a scientist. But my understanding is, you know, we're seeing these changes in wildfire regimes like quite recently, as some of these like severe fire years, and there hasn't been an enormous amount of work that I've seen, like being able to specifically say these are the kinds of sites where natural regeneration will not likely occur. There's been some studies, but they haven't translated specifically into management tools, again, because forestry isn't as big of an industry in specifically in the territories. So that's some thoughts with regards to that.
Thank you, Monica. Another good question from Avir RB to Floyd. How do you think cutting trees after fires influence regeneration?
Well, we haven't cut any trees after a forest fire, like that hasn't been done in our area. But what I notice is when a fire happens, it's quite amazing because all the plants and whatever burns, it's like nutrients to the ground, and it's incredible. Like this past summer, we had a forest fire, I believe was around May 8th. It's very early in the spring. And by time you drove around in July, the ground was already green with plants. So it's incredible how fast the plants come back after a fire. But we don't really cut the trees after the fire, but I do believe people sell wood, and they usually harvest those trees probably 3-4 years after the burn, and they dry out pretty good. They're kind of a dirty wood, so when you saw it up, it like you have to file your chainsaw a lot more often than you would cutting a normal tree. So, you know, you definitely see the growth in the fire after the burn, but you know, we definitely don't cut them right after. But I think that might be something we would you know, definitely consider, but we'd have to look at how viable that is in terms like what's the return and stuff like that. In our community, we're pretty business minded, and we don't like wasted effort. So if you know, if a forest fire burns close to our community, I know the wood haulers definitely cut those trees down and sell them for firewood. So, you know, it creates an economy, but it, you know, the trade-off is not it's not good, like, because you lose, like, we're treaty people, so we lose all the animals, and it takes like probably 10 years you start to see like a lot of game start moving back in after a forest fire. And some of our best hunting for big game like moose and stuff like that are in a young stand about 10 years old. You'll see a lot of moose in there. And we definitely, you know, we think forest fires are good, but they're also you know, like, they're good in terms of it creates an area where game comes back for a certain period of time after a fire. And then once the forest grows to a certain age, then those animals kind of move away. Like the conifer forests, you don't find as much moose activity. as you would in a young stand of hardwoods and stuff like that. So that, I guess, we don't cut the trees after a forest fire, but the firewood guys do.
Thank you, Floyd. Everything in moderation, including fire, eh?
Yeah.
The next question is for Melanie from an anonymous attendee who may have missed the information in your presentation, but they wanted to know, what tree species are you planting? And are you considering planting a more mixed composition for future climate conditions?
So yes, definitely. That is like one of our highest priority or higher priorities in our planting is planting mixed species, partly to make the forest more resilient when it comes to pathogens and forest health issues, but also planting. Through BC government, we have tools to select both the seed for seed lots that will be more adapted to future climates in those areas, to future climates in that specific area, looking at what the future climate will be, as well as species. We plant, I've heard we plant something like at minimum 13 different species, but I've heard as many as 22. So, and now with the increase in, and I don't know if that anyone wants me to list them off, or if I even could right now. We sometimes test each other and say, hey, can you list all those species? Forester test. And now we've started adding some native plants as well. We have planted huckleberries, but this year there are plans to plant even more other plant species as well, and definitely not just conifers. We've been increasing the number of deciduous we plant, which also helps with helping with being more resistant to fire as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Another question from an anonymous attendee to Monica, sorry. In understanding the winter range patterns of the caribou, how important has knowledge from the community been in understanding those dynamics and priority areas for planting? How is incorporating Indigenous knowledge and Western science being approached on this project?
Yeah, so like before, prior to this project, there's been a significant amount, like to my understanding, there's been a significant amount of collaboration between Clecho and the Northwest Territories government in completing range planning for caribou. So, you know, like, and for herds across the territory, there's like Bathurst herd and then multiple other herds, but specifically Clecho and the Northwest Territories government have collaborated on a range plan that mapped the, you know, the historic range of the caribou. And a lot of that was based on traditional knowledge, and then kind of the current annual range extent, and then how different parts of it are utilized for different like life cycle activities of the caribou. And a lot of that is was like kind of pieces coming together from community, like hunters' observations, as well as researchers. And then, like, in addition to that, there's a guardian programs that go on, and that's kind of a big part of ongoing monitoring of the health of the herd. So there's a kind of there's a fair amount of work between Clecho and the Northwest Territories government that kind of bring those two sources of knowledge together, and we're drawing on as much of that work that's available to us as we possibly can.
Well, thank you. We have I think time for one, maybe two more. One more?
Let's do two more.
From an anonymous attendee, to both Monica and Floyd, but I'm going to ask Floyd for his answer here. Mentioning training, you mentioned training community members. Is this mostly focused on youth learning to plant? Are there other roles for different community members that are there being trained in?
Well, the way our program is set up is the Blue Green Project. The people that I guess are managing the company, they provide all the training. So all we do is we bring the people from each community to a location, and at that location, the Blue Green Project will train those individuals so they're prepared to start planting trees once the training is done. And so basically we just provide the people, and all of the the logistics and everything is taken care of by people from the Blue Green Project.
Okay. Thank you, Floyd. One quick question. We'll ask Melanie. Is the BC Ministry of Forests working with any other provincial ministries on the program? I'm curious about the collaboration opportunities for tourism, job creation, etc.
Yeah, I was just starting to type an answer to this one. We work really closely right now, especially with the Ministry of Water, Lands and Resource Stewardship. We are working on, we have an element of the 2 billion tree program that's focused on species at risk habitat restoration. So we work closely with them, especially on those types of projects. But we are always open to working with other ministries. I know when we used to be Forest Carbon Initiative, we did work with tourism in planting areas, white bark pine areas in high elevation areas. And yeah, definitely always happy to talk about job creation. We work together with the Western Forestry Contractors Association in partnership with them. And definitely there are lots of opportunities for jobs. What I'm hearing recently, especially in the surveying part of things, needing more surveyors, and also tree planting. I think when I was younger, I think people were more keen on tree planting than folks might be nowadays. It seems like it's trickier to find tree planters out there, and once you have them, to keep them.
For sure. I'm sorry, Floyd. I hope I didn't cut you off there.
No, you didn't. I just actually wanted to say a few things about caribou. We actually live in an area where there's thousands of caribou, and the caribou in our area, I guess we've utilized them as for our traditional hunts and stuff, and we have a really good understanding of them. And it's almost like how a farmer has his cattle in his herd. Well, it's like us here too. We know the herds and where they travel, all their trails, where they have their young, and kind of the areas that they eat in and hang out in. And some of the stuff I've been to a lot of wildlife conferences, I guess, and I've heard a lot of experts talk about how forestry, when you log out an area, they say that the caribou don't go back there. Well, if you burn an area, the caribou don't go back there for quite a while. And caribou hang out in jack pine areas, rocky areas, because of the food they eat. And what we find is in the summertime, it's pretty easy to go look at the calves because they're all on the islands. That's where all the cows go to have their babies. And one of the things that we do to mitigate to keep our population healthy is we target all the predators. So we try and get rid of the bears and the wolves, because they're the ones that impact the caribou population. When you log an area, they move because they have time. It's very different from a fire. And this one guy, I listened to him, and he was a professor. And he was talking about all his degrees, about what he knew about the caribou. And he made a statement about, if you log an area, the caribou don't go back there. Well, that might be true, but it all depends when you log it. If you log it during the winter months, when the snow kind of cushions the equipment from the ground and it doesn't disturb the lichen that they eat, that caribou will go back to that harvest block. Because I have videos, lots of videos, and that's what I showed that professor. I said, well, your statement isn't true, because here's a video of a whole herd grazing on a winter cut. We didn't cut that in the summer, we cut it in the winter. And the caribou were there, and they actually came to me where I was standing videoing. You know, it was quite a video, and it actually gets circulated between industry and all these wildlife people that think they know the land and how things work. But we always say to them, you live in the city, you don't even experience nature. I live in the bush, I experience it 100%, and we're out on the land, and we know what goes on out there. And, you know, we could write books about it, but, you know, we don't. We live the way we've always lived as Cree people, and we respect the land, you know, and we understand what happens. So, you know, we're always available for good traditional knowledge of the land. And it's always nice to have a good laugh when you see city folk being professional nature people. And you know, some of them don't even really know what goes on out here, because all their knowledge is based on what they read in a book. My knowledge is based on my experience on the land and the ancient teachings that have been passed down to us for tens of thousands of years on the land. And, you know, we apply all those teachings to all our governance, to all our environmental policies. Everything we do, you know, it's based on ancient teachings that no book will ever give you. And so we keep, you know, we just enjoy our land and what goes on. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Floyd. Thank you
Thanks,
for
Floyd.
sharing
Thanks.
your experience.
Mm.
And definitely when it comes to wildfire recovery, we will never have a one-size-fits-all approach for tree planting and restoration. Landscape restoration overall is an adaptive approach, so what worked for a representative site in the past may not work anymore in our changing climate. The Society for Ecological Restoration outlines 8 basic principles when restoring land after significant disturbance and degradation. This framework includes engaging local and Indigenous communities involving in a project, using native reference ecosystems, relies on measurable indicators, maintains its value when scaled up, and is part of a broader integrative plan of restorative activities. The management decisions we make for the land after wildfire depends on a variety of factors, and it's important that we have these conversations. Knowing more about this practice will add to the confidence levels needed to make those critical land management decisions. So thank you once again, Monica, Floyd, and Melanie, for being so generous with your time and sharing your experience today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Val.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. In the coming weeks, we'll have the recordings on our Knowledge Hub. I just wanted to share where it is, reforestcollective.ca/knowledge hub. Visit our website, let us know if you have any questions. and all 6 recordings will be there in French and English of all 3 sessions. We hope that you follow us there and add us to LinkedIn as well. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.